The Penn State Wrestling Show is back, trying to get you once a week, if not once every other week, here in the off season to give you an update about what is going on with the Nittany Lions as they go into the off season competition mode. And our reporter, who's following all of that, Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, today's star of the show, as he always is here on the Wrestling Show. Greg, welcome. We haven't talked in a bit. I know I just said we try to get about every other week. It's been a little bit longer than that since the last time we talked, so we got a good, healthy update for fans today. So off the top, how are you? And then how's Penn State Wrestling doing?
I'm good, T. Frank. I'm excited to dive back into it. Yeah, we took a couple weeks off there, but plenty to catch up on. Lots to get to. The transfer portal has closed since you and I last talked. Mitchell Messenbrink and Luke Lillidahl punched their ticket to Final X, and some other Nittany Lion connections are going to try and do that this weekend. We'll preview the U.S. Senior World Team Trials Tournament, which is coming up Friday and Saturday in Louisville, Kentucky, and we'll close out with some news and notes from around the program since we last talked. So yeah, I think we've talked about this before, but there's not really an off season, it feels like, in the college football world anymore. And the college wrestling world has always, to some degree, been this way because of the way the freestyle season follows the folk style college season. But certainly now more than ever, the news just seems to pile up in bulk. And so we'll keep you as posted as we can throughout the summer when that happens.
Yeah, so let's just start with a good review of the transfer portal because it's closed. We now have the final tally. So what is the final tally for Penn State in terms of players out and players in?
Yeah, so Rocco Welsh, the former Ohio State All-American, who, of course, came to Penn State after a year where he took a redshirt year and competed unattached at Ohio State. Now he's going to wrestle at 184 pounds for the Nittany Lions. Of course, Carter Starachi vacates that spot. So he's the only wrestler in for Penn State. Outbound, obviously a little bit busier. You had Gary Steen, Alex Facundo, and Zach Ryder, who many thought was going to compete with Rocco Welsh initially for the 184-pound job. All move on to Oklahoma State. David Evans is out the door to Utah Valley, where he will hopefully be able to contribute after putting in a lot of good effort for Penn State, both as a spot starter and as a practice room partner. So hopeful for him, much like with Terrell Barraclaw, that going out to Utah Valley leads to the kind of success he hopes for at the college level. And then, yeah, you have those three guys that are off to Oklahoma State. A couple others still looking around as well. So we'll see. But by and large, I would say about what you would expect from the outgoing portion of the transfer portal. We talked, probably right around this time last year, maybe a little bit later. I can't remember exactly when it all went down, but that it was not that particular moment in time that you had to watch for David Taylor and Oklahoma State getting some guys either with Penn State connections or on the Penn State team. It was this time, now that we're sitting here talking. And, Facundo was a guy who was basically without a weight class or a starting spot anyway, to some extent. He moved down to 157 this year with 165 before. Neither spot's open for Penn State in 2025, 2026. Gary Steen was kind of, again, a guy that contributed plenty to the Penn State wrestling room, but was not going to start at Penn State. And then Zach Ryder, again, Welsh in, Ryder out, how it all played out, chicken egg. Again, I think that at this point, it seems like Welsh came to Penn State first and then Ryder left, whether that was in response to that or whether he was planning to all along. Maybe we'll learn at some point down the road. But yeah, all told, not a crazy portal season for Penn State, a little bit of a busier one, and especially in the outgoing perspective than in years past. But I don't know if you sit here, aside from Ryder, which again changed once the Welsh incoming transfer took place. I'm not really sure you look at the list of guys moving on and could be surprised by it. In fact, if anything, there might be some guys still on the roster who some fans thought would be considering moving on. So that was not the case. The portal's now closed. Again, with the grad transfer entry process and commencement just taking place, I guess, you could see some guys still going around the country. I would expect most of that movement, though, to be done at this point, both at Penn State and elsewhere. And we'll see where things go from here. But it's about that time of year where we can start taking a closer look at the Penn State wrestling lineup for 2025, 2026 as they go for not just the consecutive dual meet winning streak record, but also, of course, another NCAA title.
Yeah, the situation with Oklahoma State and the kind of the narrative and the storyline of all of that going into this offseason. I was super interested in that. And I know you kind of gave your thoughts there just now. You're not an Oklahoma State wrestling reporter, but how do you think this affects their lineup? How do you think does this improve their roster overall to your kind of knowledge of the situation? And do you think this is going to be something that you consistently see, or is there going to be kind of a phasing out after some of those relationships and some of those ties? Obviously, they're never going away fully, but diminish in terms of the interpersonal direct relationship to David Taylor with some of these guys.
Yeah, I don't think it makes Penn State wrestling, or I'm sorry, the Oklahoma State wrestling lineup any worse. I mean, again, I think you look at Ryder and the fact that many thought he was going to be a starter at Penn State, and you presume that he's going to start there. I frankly don't know enough about their middleweight situation to tell you about Facundo, but I can't, I don't think Alex Facundo was looking in the portal and thought to himself, I'm going to go somewhere where it's going to be really hard to get on the mat like it is at Penn State.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think just with taking a 50,000-foot view of the Oklahoma State program, I think you can assume that at the very least he'll only have maybe one other guy to compete with for a starting job at whatever weight he decides to go, 157 or 165, and then Gary Steen will just have to wait and see if he is again kind of a spot starter or if he can find his way into the starting lineup. But yeah, right. I don't think it makes him worse. Obviously, as David Taylor begins to build that program, they're probably a little bit more active in the transfer portal and maybe what they'll be down the road. Maybe not. I mean, I think it's easy and lazy to some extent to think David Taylor might run his program just like Cale Sanderson, which has obviously been very selective in the portal, not going out and necessarily always getting the top tier guys, getting guys that can fill holes in their lineup, but not necessarily always a top tier guy. And so David Taylor and Oklahoma State have been able to do that a little bit differently during his first year now going into his second season at Oklahoma State. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that continues to be the plan or if as they get these high school guys in, they have to rely less and less on that because they can start building up their homegrown talent instead of mixture of relying on what was there previously versus what they could get in when he was hired late last year, and obviously now getting these 2025 guys in here too. So we shall see. But yeah, Oklahoma State certainly had a nice season in David Taylor's first year, and it's not going away moving forward.
Yeah, and I think there is a certain level of trying to establish your culture and guys guys you trust. This is in every single sport, bringing in people you're familiar with that can kind of, on the player level, set a standard for what you're expecting out of the rest of your players who you're maybe getting to know. Carter Sirachi, D1 Wrestler of the Year by Open Mat. Any thoughts there on that honor? And I know, he didn't win the Hodge Trophy, but how do you view kind of the recap of the award season for him?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I thought it would have been announced a little bit sooner, but they do this every year. So it's not, they go from the junior college ranks the whole way up through all three divisions, ending with D1. So that's why this award comes out, about a month and a half after the season ended. But no, I mean, I think it's a fair honor for Sirachi. Obviously, he was in the Hodge mix as well. It just is another accolade for him at the end of a tremendous folk style career. Obviously, the only 5-time champ, as we've talked about endlessly. All-American every year, of course, 2 at Penn State. So impressive career. And now it's on to both the freestyle scene, which we're going to get into in a bit. He is registered to wrestle this weekend. And also MMA, if he chooses to go more of that direction as well. So certainly excited to see what's next for him. He's been not completely quiet, but pretty quiet, especially for his standards, about what's next.
I was just about to say that.
And so we know he's been training some MMA. We know he's registered to wrestle this weekend at the U.S. Senior World Team Trials Challenge Tournament. So, he's obviously dabbling a little bit in both. Which one he ends up, completely pursuing, or if he'll continue to try and do both, I don't know. I mean, I think at this time last year, before he decided to come back, it certainly sounded like the MMA route was going to be where he went next. Now, is he going to focus more freestyle than he was previously? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But he's definitely going to wrestle this weekend. So that's the next opportunity we'll have to see what's up with him.
Yeah, so let's talk about, we'll start with some of the current Penn State Nittany Lions in the freestyle season. The U.S. Open, Luke Lillidahl came away a champion. So tell us a little bit more about that and Final X, which I believe is coming up this weekend, right?
So this event will qualify the second, some weight classes, the second competitor in, or every weight class, I guess, except for two, the second competitor at Final X. So the U.S. Open, where
Okay.
Luke Lillidahl and Mitchell Messenbrink won championships back in April, that qualified them for Final X. Lillidahl has to beat Spencer Lee in a best of three matches series for the 57 kilogram U.S. World Team spot at the senior level. Messenbrink will find out who his opponent is based on who wins the 74 kilogram bracket on Saturday afternoon in Louisville. So those two guys are not competing this weekend. They're already in for that event, which is set for June 14th, I believe it is, in Providence, in New Jersey. And so they're looking forward to that at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. I'm getting all my P's and stuff mixed up here. So we'll see how they do and who they end up, who in Messenbrink's case, who he ends up facing. When you're talking about the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, we should just note that, just to cover it here, that Kyle Snyder, 97 kilogram champ at the U.S. Open, member of the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. He was arrested in Columbus over the weekend, according to news reports. Charging documents from the police in Columbus charge him with a misdemeanor of engaging in prostitution. As we tape this on Tuesday afternoon, no statement yet from him or USA Wrestling or the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club or the Final X organizers about how, if at all, any of that might impact his spot at Final X. Again, they're just charges. He has a court date set next week, so we'll wait and see how that all plays out. Wanted to mention it, don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but he is a member of the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, and it could impact his time at Final X. We'll have to, again, just wait and see. We'll cover that over at BlueIllustrated.com. When anything is said, more comes of it, but at least at that moment in time, it's those three Nittany Lion Wrestling Club competitors who have a spot at Final X, which, again, is the senior level event that sets the U.S. World Team for the World Tournament later this year. And there's a handful of guys, as you mentioned earlier, T. Frank, battling for that chance to join them in New Jersey and try and make the World Team as well.
Yeah, so the World Team Challenge this coming weekend. Tell us more about that and what Penn State fans can expect there.
Yeah, so it's going to be a busy weekend, or at least Friday. We'll see how many make it to the finals on Saturday. But I'm just going to run through the full list of names here, T. Frank, that who's competing, and then we can get into some of the more specifics. But we do have multiple Nittany Lions listed in the same weight classes, so that's always fun. 65 kilograms, which is 143.3 pounds. Penn State 2025 signee Marcus Blaze. Bo Bartlett, who of course just wrapped up his eligibility at Penn State, and Nittany Lion assistant coach Nick Lee are in that weight class. Nick Lee hasn't wrestled for a while, so I'll be very curious, at least in the the competitive freestyle international quote-unquote scene. So curious to see how he performs there, as long with those two other former and one future Penn State wrestler. PJ Duke, Blaze's classmate in the class of 2025, is going to wrestle at 70 kilograms, which is 154.3 pounds. Penn State senior Levi Haynes is in at 79 kilograms, which is 174.1 pounds. Carter Starachi and Kyle Dake are wrestling at 86 kilograms, which is 189.5 pounds. And then Josh Barr coming out at 92 kilogram division, which is 202.8 pounds. So a little bit of a bump from where he was at 197 during the season, but nothing crazy. So that's who's in right now. Again, caution, as we usually do when we tape these tournament shows on the freestyle scene, is that there was someone who, unrelated to Penn State or Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, but entered late just this morning, registered for this event. So I'm not saying that it's out of the question that somebody like an Aaron Brooks or another Penn State wrestler like the Mirasola twins I thought might be on this list. They are not. So it's not out of the question that more names may pop up on the final entry sheet compared to what you'll hear us talk about here today. But at least as of right now, that's who's in for Penn State, the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. If there's anyone at it, we'll make note of it over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But competitive weekend on hand for up ahead for Penn State as they try and get more guys to New Jersey next month.
You mentioned this before the show, and I found it interesting because we haven't mentioned his name, and you just said it. Aaron Brooks has been a bit MIA this offseason. Just interesting kind of as a note there that we haven't really had a conversation about a guy who, at least for the first part of the show, began this sort of upheaval in Penn State culture, beating David Taylor, creating the Oklahoma State job situation, all those things. He's since then we haven't heard or seen a whole lot from him on the wrestling scene, at least this offseason in particular. So let's go back to the World Team Challenge and any of those Matchups. I know you mentioned at 143, there's a lot of Penn State connections. What interests you from the lineup here?
Yeah, so again, Nick Lee is the one that fascinates me the most at 65 kilograms. Obviously, he's had tons of success previously. We just haven't really seen him on the mat in a while. And so I'm not sure. Obviously, he's very good, and he just didn't forget how to wrestle overnight. He's in the room with these guys,
Yeah.
all day, all year long since joining the Penn State staff. And even before that, as a member of the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. So just curious to see how he does. I think when the seeds come out, he will probably be the top seed in that weight class, and that's fair. And we'll see if he can back it up with a win. With Marcus Blaze, he's actually moving up a little bit in weight. This is, again, 65 kilograms. He wrestled 61 previously. So it's a little bit of a bump up. So we'll see how that all plays out. Duke is just a fascinating guy to watch anytime he's on the mat. I'm not sure if he wins the 70 kilogram division, but he certainly has a chance to. There's no question about that in my mind. So, and then again, Levi Haynes will be very competitive at 79. We'll see if he is able to take that. Dean Hamidi from Oklahoma State's a guy who he's probably, we'll see in the finals, maybe not, but I think there's a good chance of that. And then, again, I think that Carter Starachi, it's just fascinating to see what is next for him now that his college days are officially and finally over. So we'll see how he does. I think that Dake probably is the, I don't know about heavy favorite, but definitely the solid favorite to win and go to Final X at 86. But we'll see if anyone has anything for him, another Nittany Lion Wrestling Club member, of course. And then Josh Barr, I think that he impressed at the, at the college level, of course. There's no doubt about that. He's a guy that comes into this event with previous freestyle international experience that is, very strong. So time will tell if he can win that bracket. But I think if I had to guess, and I don't pre-write these things like we do football stuff because there's just too many variables, but if I had to guess what I'll be writing Saturday afternoon after the finals, I think we see at least two of these guys we're talking about moving on to Final X. I don't know. I don't think they're all going to. This isn't like the NCAA tournament where you might be able to make a case for most, if not all, Penn State's guys to win their particular bracket. But I think you'll see at least a couple, if not a few, moving on to Final X. So we'll see how it all plays out. We'll have it covered at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But another exciting weekend ahead for Penn State and Nittany Lion Wrestling Club fans.
Yep, and of course, we'll be back to recap it and any other news that happens, any other notes here in the Penn State wrestling offseason. For Greg Pickle, I'm Thomas Renkar. Make sure you subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel so you don't miss it. And it is one of those things where if you're not paying attention, you might come back in 4 or 5 days and be like, oh, man, there's an episode I didn't know about. So make sure you subscribe, enable notifications. That way you get all of our updates. We'll talk to you next time.